It's hard to overstate just how important stout has been to Ireland's national identity. This thick, dark beer is synonymous with Irish culture, so much so that it's often called simply Irish beer. But did you know that for decades, stout wasn't very popular in its home country at all? Damn! In fact, it was an imported English beer that eventually became the world's most famous stout. Let's pour one out for the big guy and explore the legacy of Guinness. Stout is a style of dark, strong ale, known for its robust body and creamy, thick head. It gets its deep color from roasted barley, which also gives it a bitter taste balanced by notes of caramel, toffee, and chocolate. The style originated in England in the early 18th century, but quickly gained favor across the rest of Europe. During the brewing process, yeast consumes the sugars in the wort, or unfermented beer, leaving behind alcohol and a variety of complex flavors. Then comes the secret ingredient, nitrogen. When forced through a narrow valve, it creates those signature creamy cascades we love. But unlike many other beers, stout doesn't actually get its name from a person. Instead, it refers to the intense dark color, sometimes bordering on black. You see, back when it first appeared, people were really into categorizing beers based on their appearance, with names like brown, bitter, entire, and mild, and because stout was so incredibly dark, it made sense to call it, well, stout. These days there are 5 main categories of stout: dry, sweet, milk, imperial, and oatmeal. Each has their own unique characteristics, but they all share that thick consistency and intense flavor. While stouts are brewed around the world today, perhaps no city is more closely associated with the beer than Dublin, Ireland. After all, it is here that Arthur Guinness first began brewing his famous porter in 1759. Today, visitors can tour the historic brewery where it all began. But it turns out the iconic building was never actually meant to be a brewery at all. When Arthur arrived in Dublin, he was looking for a new venture. He had trained as a brewer and spent time working in England, but was searching for something of his own. After hearing about plans to redevelop a dilapidated brewery in the heart of Dublin, he jumped at the chance to lease the site. Located near the bustling waterfront, it seemed like the perfect place to start his business. But it didn't exactly look like much. Built in 1618, the old brewery had fallen into disrepair, and the company went bankrupt before production even started. Still, Arthur saw potential. With a little elbow grease, he thought he could turn it into the premier brewery in town. Arthur set about making the space habitable, dividing up the large room with movable partitions to create offices and living quarters. He made improvements to the equipment and set about creating a superior product. But even the best business plan isn't worth much without customers. So what was Arthur's secret to success? Well, for starters, he sold his beer at reasonable prices, attracting the attention of the working class. It was a hit. Soon word got around Dublin that this new brewery was serving up some of the best beer in town. His porter was smooth, easy to drink, and packed a powerful punch. At 12.5% alcohol by volume, it was twice as strong as most ales. But Arthur was savvy enough to realize he couldn't rely on word of mouth forever. He needed to set his beer apart from the competition, so he came up with a bold plan: print the name of the beer directly onto the bottles. Up until that point, breweries would sell their beer in bulk to tavern owners, who then resold it under their own labels. If people liked a certain brew, they might ask for it by name. But when there were dozens of different brands, that wasn't always possible. Not to mention beer labels were often inaccurate, leading to mispurchases. Guinness knew he could stand out by putting his name right on the bottle, and it worked. By the 1770s, he was selling 24,000 barrels of porter a year, making him the most successful brewer in Dublin. After a decade in business, Arthur decided it was finally time to expand. In 1769, he purchased the St. James's Gate Brewery down the road, nearly tripling his production capacity. There was only one problem. As you may have noticed if you've ever visited Dublin, the two sites aren't exactly close. Arthur needed a way to transport his beer from one brewery to the other without losing quality. So he did what any reasonable businessman would do. He bought an entire street and built a tunnel underneath it. Known as the Dark Lane, it allowed his porters to move between locations without being exposed to the elements. It remains the only pedestrian street in Dublin to this day. But while Arthur was growing his business, he was also getting older. After spending nearly 30 years running the brewery, he decided it was time to step back. In 1778, he sold the business to his son-in-law, a fellow brewer named Arthur Cecil Guinness. But don't worry, the original Arthur stuck around to help ensure a smooth transition. In fact, he lived at the brewery until his death in 1803. Under the new management, Guinness continued to thrive. Arthur Cecil expanded production again, opening a second location in London to serve the growing English market. Unfortunately, he died just 6 years later, passing the business along to yet another Arthur, this time his son, Arthur Benjamin Lee Guinness. Arthur BLG took over the family business at the age of just 23. Like his father, Arthur BLG was passionate about giving back to the community. During his tenure, he donated thousands of pounds to local charities, funded schools and hospitals, and even helped build Dublin's first purpose-built theatre. But not everything was so rosy. In 1826, a rival brewery tried to sabotage Guinness by dumping sawdust into the river used to transport their beer. It was a nasty trick, but it backfired on them. When the Guinness family heard about it, they decided to take action. They invested heavily in new transportation methods, including horse-drawn carriages and eventually a fleet of motor vehicles. In 1862, Arthur BLG retired from the business, leaving it in the hands of his son, Edward Cecil Guinness, the second Earl of Ivygg. Once again, a new generation of leadership ushered in a new era for the company. Edward oversaw major expansions both at home and abroad, establishing a U.S. subsidiary in New York City and beginning the process of exporting Guinness to Africa. But sadly, he never got to see these ventures come to fruition. In 1898, he died aboard the Titanic, becoming one of only 2 aristocrats to perish in the disaster. Today, the story of Edward Cecil Guinness is almost forgotten, overshadowed by the tragedy that befell him. But he played an important role in shaping the future of the company. Edward left the business to his son, Rupert, the 3rd Earl of Ivygg, who continued his father's legacy of philanthropy. Under his watch, the company divested from its unprofitable U.S. operations and instead focused on expanding within the British Empire. He also opened up the company's books to the public, which led to a windfall profit and the ability to pay higher wages and offer better benefits to employees. But the good times didn't last forever. At the outbreak of World War II, Guinness found itself caught in the middle. Ireland remained neutral throughout the conflict, but that didn't stop the British government from pressuring Guinness to supply their troops with beer. It was a difficult position for the company to be in, but ultimately they decided to comply, angering many of their Irish customers. Fortunately, after the war, things returned to normal. Guinness even began advertising in the United States once more. Their iconic toucan mascot made his first appearance in 1933 and hasn't stopped smiling since. These days, Guinness is owned by Diageo, one of the largest distillers in the world. But despite its international success, the company still calls Ireland home. More than 250 years since Arthur Guinness first opened the doors to his Dublin brewery, the company remains deeply ingrained in Irish society. In fact, it's estimated that 1 out of every 4 adults in Ireland drinks Guinness. But did you know that for decades, stout wasn't particularly popular in Ireland at all? That's right. For most of its history, Guinness was actually an imported English beer. It wasn't until after independence that Irish people warmed up to the idea of drinking stout. And today, the iconic brand is enjoyed by people all over the world. So next time you pour yourself a pint of Guinness, take a moment to appreciate the rich history behind this timeless brew. From its humble beginnings in Dublin to its current status as a global icon, Guinness has come a long way. And we're sure Arthur would have been proud to see how far his beer has come over the years. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to drop us a like, and don't forget to subscribe.